Welcome to RotoWire, live instant reactions of the Saturday wild card day in the NFL playoffs with Anthony Cervino. Before we get started here, there are 3 games on Sunday. Anthony and I will react to those 3 games Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, right where you're watching it right now. And then if you want a reaction on that Monday night game, that Vikings-Rams game, Tuesday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. We wanted to break these down now because tomorrow, look, we have 3 games of football. Everybody's be ready for that. So we're going to definitely get rolling with that. Anthony, I guess we'll just start this out the easy way. Chargers, Texans, what was your expectation of that game? And in relation, how did you feel after it was over?
Well, going into the game, I was heavy on the Chargers. I did not like the way Houston was playing football down the stretch. Joe Mixon couldn't get going. C.J. Stroud didn't look good. And also down the stretch, J.K. Dobbins returns, and all of a sudden, so does Justin Herbert. The defense is playing well. So I thought that, covering 2.5 for the Chargers, they would win outright, cover the spread. And boy, was I wrong. From early in that game, the Chargers offense never got going. And it's not like, to be fair here, Houston's offense didn't look great either. But I think the difference in this game was Nico Collins. I like Ladd McConkey a lot, but he's not a game changer to me. And granted, he made that one big play, but he's not somebody you could just keep targeting and he's going to blow the game open. Nico Collins is, and that's the difference in the game. Nico Collins made a couple of monster plays and really took over momentum and control of the game for Houston. So I think Nico was the difference in the fact that the Chargers really don't have that type of a player on offense, at least in my opinion, is a difference in that game.
Yeah, so I'll stick on this side of the ball right now and give my thoughts on this too. The first 6 pass attempts, not one of those went to Nico Collins. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are they doing? They hadn't used him that well in the last 3 weeks of the season. So week 14 by, he was averaging like 55 yards. I'm like, didn't really get that. But all right, they had a playoff spot salted away. I get it, whatever. But this is a one and done. And 6 targets. And John Mechie certainly fumbles one, and that led to a field goal for the Chargers. And it was problematic. And early on, Joe Mixon had no room to run. And Joe Mixon, look, all year, you watch the runs. Frequently, that left line, that side of the line is good. You notice he runs to the left because they have 3 decent linemen on the left, including the center. To the right, their offensive line is terrible. You notice he very rarely runs to the right. And we've seen teams like Dallas overstack. And I thought from a game planning perspective that the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh's a pretty sharp guy. I thought I would have figured that out. Now, I'll give them a little leeway because Mixon really didn't cave them in until the game was out of hand. So there's that. But back to the Nico Collins thing. That's the whole thing, right? It was that the Chargers, they're a well-coached defense. But I've been saying all year, they don't have guys. Khalil Mack on and off as a pass rusher. Joey Bosa is not the same guy he was 3 years ago. Derwin James is a safety, and they move him all around. But they don't really have any corners that scare anybody. And ultimately, when you get Nico Collins on crossers and they got to pass him off among these secondary corners, it's a real problem. And they were down a free safety too. Louis Gilman, I believe, was out in this one as well. So they were down people. And it was exactly the game plan it should have been. I just don't know why the Texans didn't start after the first drive of the game. But like you said, all season we've seen it. When you use Nico Collins in the middle of the field, he's the too high safety buster because he doesn't go over the top of it. He goes to the second, between the second and third level, and then people aren't big and fast like him. There are very few guys in the league with that profile, and he can break that. And as you saw, Anthony, when this game was over, there were 3 players that put up stats. It was Stroud throwing for 282, and he ran for 42. He normally doesn't run. He took off here. Mixon for 106 and a touchdown, most of that when they were grinding the game weight. It was great. And then Collins for 122. But really, it was just those 3. Any other further thoughts on the Texans?
Yeah, obviously they advance here, but is there anybody else on this offense? Because obviously going into the divisional round, you're going to need somebody else to step up. There needs to be an auxiliary weapon that has to step up and make plays. I don't know if and this is another team. They had Diggs, they had Dell. Can we see a possibility of maybe a Dalton Schultz? Because Dalton Schultz, when given the opportunity to pass 2 years with injuries, he has played well. They didn't really need him here, but I think Dalton Schultz could be an X factor moving forward.
There's no doubt he could be. Here was an issue that I had with the Texans. It was late in the game, and they were trying to salt it away, and I get it, but they were running the ball, and they were fine, and they get a first down, and three guys start going nuts, Mixon and a couple others, and then Mixon's partying in the silence, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, you're winning a home wild card round playoff game, and you're celebrating like you just won the Super Bowl. And what that tells me, and look, take it for what it's worth. But when I see that kind of celebrating a wild card game where you were barely an underdog, like a couple points, you're done next week. You're done because you just won your Super Bowl. Because you act like that and you're a pro athlete, you won your Super Bowl today. They are going to get smoked next week because, look, I love Nico Collins. You know that. I've loved him for years. Loved him as a rookie. The injuries were a problem, and that said, loved him since he was a rookie. But they turned the ball over 4 times in this game. Three times. Mixon fumble, Mechie fumble, and Stroud threw an interception. They should have had a fourth. Derwin James couldn't hang on to that ball. That would have been a 4th turnover. They turned the ball over 3 times, and it should have been 4th, and they won by 20 points. You turn the ball over 3 times next week, and you're losing by 30 points. Even if they play a near perfect game, C.J. Stroud's not been good all year. He has not been good. Whatever defense they play, whether it's probably Kansas City, but if it's Bills or Ravens, they will have an answer for Nico Collins because they don't have enough ancillary targets, like you said, to make them pay. They will do what they have to do to put extra attention on him. And Joe Mixon, like we said, teams are going to overplay the offensive left, and they are going to put him in a spot where there's too many bodies. He's they have nowhere to go. We saw that many, many weeks down the stretch. So I really think that I'm happy for them that they won, but I think they were way too emotionally excited about it, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, that's a good observation. And what surprises me is that it was Joe Mixon you pointed out, because it's not like Joe Mixon
up on the sideline.
It's not like he's never been there. He's been to a Super Bowl. He should realistically be the leader.
Right.
Rallying the young guys. Like, hey, this is not what we should be doing right now. I've been there. We got to concentrate on next week. This isn't really nothing to celebrate. This is a wild card game.
Yes, exactly. And Jerry Rice summed it up. Act like you've been there before. But see, me having been an athlete myself, I understand the idea of being like emotionally flat. There's a time to celebrate. There's a time to do that. But I always noticed the people that celebrated when they shouldn't have, they didn't really advance far beyond, because you just learn a lot about how you see people in a situation. It's just, is it 100%? No. Is it a science? No. It's just a lot of feel things I have, having been an athlete and seeing them and being in situations. And you just, that's how these things often work. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I don't think in this case. Now, defensively, wow, the Texans, here is the deal, though. And we'll get to the Chargers side in a minute. But the Chargers, like you mentioned, I don't want to focus on them just yet. But if you're not getting ahead of the sticks, if you're not running the ball, and you're in an obvious passing situation, first of all, they have some real pressure. Hunter and Anderson are outstanding pass rushers, and they bring the heat. And then they do have some liabilities in their secondary. There are other outside corners, often Okudah. They rotate guys there. Terrible. Their free safety, they're down to a number 3. Terrible. They do have Lassiter, who plays typically well, but and then, of course, they got the star Stingley. But realistically, they're about half of a secondary. And if they're going to play an offense that's not behind the sticks, and that pass rush can't immediately get to the quarterback, and Herbert was under major duress, I give them a lot of credit. It's a very good defense. Very good defense. They play Kansas City, Buffalo, or Baltimore. Not going on. Anthony?
Are we going to the Chargers, or are we on Houston?
No, let's take out the Texans. I was on Texans defense.
I mean, Houston's defense, like I said, down the stretch, they weren't very impressive to me. They came out and it was almost like a perfect game. Everything went right. They were even able to bail out all of the giveaways by the offense. But I also remember times this year where the run defense was always pretty good, but this secondary has been shredded throughout the season. I think as good as the talent is, that's going to be the weak point.
Now, the other side of the ball, Chargers, you said this earlier. We were talking offline, and you talk about Nico Collins. We talked about Ladd McConkey, and Nico Collins is a game changer superstar. Ladd McConkey is an outstanding player, but it's just a different level of player. There's not take nothing away from McConkey. McConkey had 197 yards and a touchdown, outproduced Nico at the 88-yard touchdown. That was a miracle play because Herbert had just been sacked 2 straight plays, and he was getting hit for a third one, and then he threw a dime, and then McConkey made a grab. Take nothing away from McConkey. And McConkey is he going to be an early third-round pick in fantasy next year, or really sneak into the second before we go further?
I believe he finished as the wide receiver 12 overall, maybe around wide receiver 16 in points per game in PPR. I would probably feel comfortable taking him early third.
That's where I'm thinking. It's like early third for him. That's the kind of I'm thinking. And remember, he's the only game in town right now. Quentin Johnson, I had somebody telling me, I wrote my reactions article a couple weeks ago, and they're like, oh, he broke out this year. He's an upside guy. He had 2 games over 48 yards or 51, 2 games over that. I don't even want to hear it. He's not a good player. He has 8 touchdowns, and great. If you draft him in fantasy, great. You got the points. You banked him. If you lived through the goose eggs, he had one of them in the fantasy playoffs. He had a goose egg here on 5 targets. Quentin Johnson is probably going to end up his career when he's on a team with a real receiver room, probably a wide receiver 4. He's probably perfect as a wide receiver 4. Rotate him in, situational player, maybe a red zone target. He's decent in the red zone. I'll give him that. But it was all McConkey. And yardage-wise, he was the only Chargers player with more than 26 scrimmage yards. We don't count the quarterback, obviously, because he passes the ball. But 26 yards is what Dobbins had, and then 197 from McConkey. That disparity is insane.
Yeah, there's just not enough bodies. I want to ask this question, right? And obviously, Houston's defense, talented. Is there a world? Because I remember watching some of those plays. Obviously, Ladd made that big play, pads the stat, scores a touchdown. But it was almost like they were not a prevent defense where, we're going to take out everybody else. Ladd, we're going to let you catch that ball short, but we're not going to let you make that big play. He ripped that other one, but it just doesn't seem like they were impactful yards. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And what I will say is, and we saw this throughout the season, though, McConkey over the middle of the field, whether they're focusing on him or not, man, Herbert can rip the ball in the middle of the field, and McConkey is so good at getting open there. And remember, we talk about a league that plays a lot of zone. The teams that play man heavy, they're looking 35%. So they're still 60% zone. And McConkey was playing 70% of his snaps in the slot this year. And that's where he's going to be. He's going to be a slot receiver, and there's no knock on that. Amon-Ra St. Brown only plays half the slot now. He's played a lot more than them. But McConkey will be a career 70% slot guy. He doesn't really profile as well outside. He's just so good in the middle of the field. He's going to be an exciting player to watch for years to come.
Yeah, I like Ladd McConkey a lot. I think it was on the show with you where I said he's almost like a poor man's Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's kind of how I see him in fantasy. But moving off of Ladd, the other thing here, play calling. J.K. Dobbins, who has been a featured part of this offense, 9 total carries. And I get you see the score. If you're just seeing the score, then you're like, all right, well, they were playing catch up. No, they weren't. They had a 6-0 lead throughout the first quarter. They go into halftime down 10-6. Your identity in this Roman offense running the football. You didn't do that. At least not enough with your best player. It was another year of the Gus Edwards show.
Oh, my God. Dobbins had 6 carries in the first quarter, and he had 7 early in the second. So he was on pace. I had one of my props, which I lost with. I had him 15 carries or over. Obviously, you lose 32-12 if you're not getting 15 carries. But we talked about this as well. You mentioned Gus Edwards. Look, Gus Edwards is an interior runner who's in a deep state of decline, and the weakest part of that offensive line is the interior, and they bring Gus Edwards on for 7 carries. And I'm thinking to myself, look, J.K. Dobbins missed a chunk of time with an injury, but he had fresh legs. There is no reason he needed to be spotted in this game, especially when they came behind, because Dobbins could catch the ball and run with it. What is Gus Edwards going to do? And it doesn't matter because they got blown out. But I just thought, what are you doing? You can use him up in this game. You could give him 17, 18 touches in this game, even if they're in a screen game, to try to get your team back a little bit, because he's your second best weapon in the offense. And no, let's let Gus Edwards play out there. That just really bothers me.
Yeah, and Dobbins, And I get, game script wise, he had 19 and 18 carries the last 2 games of the season coming off the injury. And again, this was not a blowout at halftime.
No.
There were more, and I think that puts so much pressure on Justin Herbert.
And they had their chances.
Yeah.
They had their chances. The early turnover in the second half, they had a 41-yard pass to Nico, and then they turn it over, and then the Chargers get good field position, and again, they just bonk. Herbert turns the ball over, 4 interceptions. Now, like we said, they were in an obvious passing situation because they couldn't run, or they just got behind and they had to pass, and the pass rush was relentless, and he was getting hit. And he had, like you said, he really didn't have other weapons. No. And you're forcing the ball to the Will Dissly's of the world, who handed the ball right over to Stingley for the interception in a long run back. Beautiful there. So it wasn't all on Herbert, but realistically, they hit a buzzsaw. And I think that's probably about the end of it. If Harbaugh had a really good first year of coaching this team, and I really feel like next year they're going to add more pieces. They'll deal with that interior line, which was a bit of an issue, and I really think they'll bring in another higher end receiver one way or the other. I know they're a run-based team, but they probably learned a lot about their identity in this game. You need more than that because of the state of the NFL. Any final words on this team heading into the offseason?
Yeah, going to the offseason, you hit the nail on the head. I think they have to upgrade their skill players. And I think it's beyond wide receiver. You need to bring in some tight end help. Will Dissly is fun in fantasy, but we saw it in the big game tonight. He's really just a guy. J.K. Dobbins, there is an injury liability concern. And do you really want to keep pivoting to Sam Haskins and Gus Edwards? And this is a team won a lot of games this year, just got bounced out of the playoffs. This is a very good base that they are building in the Harbaugh era, but you need to give him more weapons.
There's no doubt. And so we'll see what the offseason brings, but that's kind of the post-mortem on the Chargers. But congratulations to the Texans and those that are fans of the Texans. They move on to the next round. And maybe I'm wrong about already kind of pronouncing them DOA, but we'll see what happens with that. But again, I just they're a nice team, but we know what they were in the second half of the season, and there was no doubt that teams were trying to jockey in to that 5th seed to be able to play them, and it didn't work out for the Chargers. But had it been a different team that got in that seed, might have been if Pittsburgh would have gotten that seed, might have been a way different story. But, that pass rush would have been all over Stroud, and Mixon would not have run for any yardage against them. Another day. But again, congratulations to the Texans. All right, let's go to the night game, the one that just ended a bit ago. The Ravens pull off a 28-14 win over the Steelers, 21-0 at the half. That was outstanding that they got that big lead. They scored a late touchdown before halftime. But I want to start out in the beginning of this game, Anthony, and everybody listen to my previews of this game. You heard me spell it out. I said that Pittsburgh's a great run defense, but they cannot defend shotgun run. And then I said, coming into this game, I want to see what adjustments Pittsburgh has because they know they're going to get a shotgun run. The first time they played Baltimore, they ran under center. Henry went about 18 for 63. They ran shotgun runs in the second game, and he ran for $162. So what did they do? This was a beautiful setup by the Ravens. I want everybody to hear this because this was a piece of artwork. They knew at a shotgun, they would just send people directly at Henry, thinking he was immediately running. Lamar Jackson ran the ball on 5 straight plays. That was on purpose. That was because we know you're targeting Henry, so we're running Lamar. Now we're going to have you on your heels. And on that same drive that they took for over 90 yards and a touchdown, Henry only ran the ball 3 times, 49 yards, because Lamar had already set them up saying, if you go after him, I'm taking off. Pittsburgh was in a bind. And then we saw like 186 yards and 2 touchdowns later. Yes, they cannot defend gun run, but I'm giving the Baltimore coaching staff a ton of credit for how they set him up. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, this Baltimore offense, it's hard to say that they look unstoppable at times, but this was just like, I don't think there was a time this year, maybe week 1 when Lamar, I think, went over 100 yards rushing, but Lamar didn't have to really do a ton of running like we've seen in years past, but they came out firing with Lamar Jackson, and that obviously opens up everything else. I actually thought this Pittsburgh defense, right, because the playoffs, third time they're seeing it, and historically they play Lamar well. I thought they were going to defend them a little bit better. that's just the difference, I think, of Derrick Henry being here. That's why they targeted Derrick Henry this offseason. It wasn't so much to get him through the regular season. They always win a lot of regular season games. It was for these playoff games that could potentially, hey, maybe without Derrick Henry, maybe they lose this game. You never know.
100%.
Now,
100%. If they don't have Henry, it's a much more difficult run.
And it just seemed like this offense once again was able to do. Now they scored 28. They were getting into the 30s at some points this year against some teams, but I don't think the game was as close as the final score. Pittsburgh had the valiant effort in the second half, but it's almost like, I don't want to say Baltimore took the foot off the gas, but this was a bigger blowout than the 14 points suggest.
So before we get to that part of it, the defense, Lamar runs for 81 yards on 15 carries. That was early in the season. He was running for those numbers, and he backed off. But playoff Lamar, they ran the ball, including clock killing, 50 times, including the kneel down. 50 rushing attempts to 21 passing attempts. This was 1970s football, and it was a thing of beauty. Leading receivers, there are two of them. Isaiah Likely. I called this one. I said he led the team in targets, but him and Just Sell had 4. I said they'd both get targets in this game with Flowers out. Likely 3 for 53. We bet him over 2.5 catches. Whew, barely got that because Lamar only threw 21 passes. Second leading receiver, Mark Andrews, 2 for 27. That was it. Bateman did catch a touchdown, so there was that. But no other receivers had Likely went over 27 yards, and nobody's complaining because this was a bludgeoning. Now, that said, I was stunned to see Anthony Miller getting 3 targets in this game. That I didn't see that one coming a million miles away. Highland Wall is good at he was involved, but I thought it was interesting that Anthony Miller was involved.
Yeah, and they obviously needed the body.
They did.
But again, I don't even. At what point were they using Anthony Miller?
Oh, they used him in the first half a little bit too.
Okay. It wasn't like in the second half. Yeah,
I was stunned. It was like a couple meaningful snaps he was in on. But you know what? Maybe if nothing else, I always say Baltimore's like a business organization. They solve problems. They're excellent, like how they patched up that defense over the first half of the second half of the season. They patched that up. I mentioned in the beginning of the segment that they didn't have success running under center with Henry. They watched the film on Pittsburgh. They found out the weakness. They approached it. They attacked it. They bludgeoned them with it twice. So great team. Defensively, you hit the nail on the head. People who listen to my show, you hear me say it every week, the subliminal switch. It is your coaches. Harbaugh came out at halftime. Kaylee Hartung interviewed him, and he said, we're playing like it's 0-0. And that's what the coaches say the whole halftime. It's 0-0. They're dangerous. But here's the problem. The subliminal switch. In the back of your mind, you're up 21-0. You are roasting this team. And as an athlete, as much as you say, they're dangerous, you just don't think they are. And because this Pittsburgh team could not move the ball in the first half. And all of a sudden, George Pickens goes up for most of his 87 yards. We see Van Jefferson catch a long touchdown. Mike Williams, a 37-yard catch. Calvin Austin, I don't remember that catch was when the game was still in question, 25-yard catch. But to me, it was very simply that. The Ravens, they made some plays in the second half, but they played like a team that was playing with a lead, and that's not good.
Yeah, this game was, like I said, a bigger blowout than it looked like. Pittsburgh never had a shot offensively. This is a team that obviously wants to establish the run. They ran the ball a total of 11 times, and obviously they were trailing much of this game. Yeah. But this is not the type of offense that has the personnel to operate one-dimensional football. And those few plays they made in the half, they weren't sustained drives, right?
Nope.
They were big chunk plays, and Baltimore's defense, they were probably playing off ball, off coverage a little bit. So again, I don't blame. I don't think this is anything to overanalyze when it comes to the Ravens defense. Is that secondary falling off like it did earlier this year? No, I think they were just, like you said, maybe taking their foot off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, and that was it. So, here's the only thing I'm going to say. Next week, they'll have a real test. Odds are there's a decent chance, probably a great chance, they're going to be playing the Bills. So there won't be an opportunity to take their foot off the gas. So there's that. And if they play, obviously, the Chiefs at some point, that won't be the case. But That said, if they do play a team of lesser competition, that could be a problem because realistically, this is things that championship teams can't afford to do. It didn't hurt them. Let's go to the Pittsburgh side. We've kind of already said it. This team lacks a real chain mover. Fryermuth's good as a tight end. They don't have that versatile receiver that could just kind of win in the middle of the field. Like you said, it's a bunch of go balls, Mike Williams, George Pickens, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin. And it's basically like shooting layups and threes. Screen to Warren, screen to Harris, downfield shot. There's no intermediate game at all. Russell Wilson, probably not his game anyway, but the personnel, like you said, it just really, really doesn't fit. And a good defense knows that you don't have that. And ultimately in the first half, they took away the things that Wilson wanted, and that was the end of it. What is this team doing in the offseason?
Pittsburgh needs to figure themselves out. Who do they want to be and what do they want to be? And if it's going to be Arthur Smith, because I know he's going to get their head coaching interviews, who knows what happens with that. But if Arthur Smith is back and they're going to run a similar offense, are you going to bring Najee Harris back? I believe he is a free agent. You do need more help at wide receiver than George Pickens. These other guys are fine. But, just like I was talking about the Chargers, you need another playmaker, especially in today's NFL. And most importantly, what are you doing at quarterback? I don't know if Russ is the answer, and I don't think Justin Fields is the answer. If you're Pittsburgh, what are you doing at the quarterback position? Because in my gut, if they don't keep what they have, they're probably going to go get Kirk Cousins, because that just seems like a Rooney thing to do.
Oh, man. The Pittsburgh defense, look, it's very hard to take anything away from them. Like there was a weakness against shotgun run, and it's just a bad matchup running into Baltimore. The way this offense is, this was the whole plan this season. Baltimore creates an offense that could be, borderline unstoppable. And it's just Pittsburgh's going to be great against most opponents. But in this particular situation, yeah, not so much, Anthony. Pittsburgh defense, anything on them?
Their defense is going to be what it is. I have a concern. TJ Watt, where was he down the stretch? I know he dealt with some injuries, but this defense, as great as it played earlier this year, I think that was a liability down the stretch, because it wasn't just the offense not being able to score the football. There were some games towards the end of the year where this defense couldn't stop anybody, including Baltimore twice. The back end of the defense, the secondary, is that something that needs to be addressed this offseason? Because I think their front seven's fine. Their secondary might be their handicap.
Yeah, when Dante Jackson plays, he's fast, but he's just not anywhere close where somebody could shut down a good receiver. Joey Porter's very handsy, gets some interference calls, but ultimately he's a good corner, but he's not a cornerstone guy. And Minkah Fitzpatrick, the free safety, he really declined this year. He was not playing at his normal level. He was not a game changer. When you watch Pittsburgh's games, you rarely heard his name come up on the broadcast, because he just was not being that ball hawking player, just breaking up big plays, not that guy. And hopefully you can have a comeback year or a bounce back year and have that going on for him. But one more thing on the Ravens. So going forward, how do you see them in terms of a potential Super Bowl run? They got one game under the belt.
If this offense plays the way it did, I think they can beat anybody in the NFL, especially in the AFC. And I normally side with Kansas City. The Derrick Henry wrinkle in this offense potentially makes Baltimore the most dangerous team in the AFC right now. Even more dangerous than KC and Mahomes, even more dangerous than what Josh Allen could bring to the table. This Baltimore offense, especially with the defense ascending the way that it's been, I don't know if there's another team in this conference that can beat them when they are clicking on all cylinders.
I am hoping that the Ravens get bad weather in the next two games. I want to see Derrick Henry running in snow and all this craziness. That would be so much fun to see. So I think that would be like something that football fans just, even if you go the passing game area, I think everybody would love that. I'm very excited. Now, look, if they do play the Bills, that game that they played back earlier in the season, they blew them out. And the Bills play nickel as a base, and Sean McDermott's never been concerned with the run. He's more concerned with the pass, because in today's NFL, he understands the explosive plays beat you. That's normally passing. This is different. And that Buffalo team is not equipped for a beast like Derrick Henry, and he wasn't in the first game. He rolled over them. I don't see any way it's not the same here. So if there's a rematch, I'm excited. But the only way that Buffalo's going to hang is going to be they're going to have to score with them, and if they can, great. But it'll be fun to watch. We'll preview that one next time. Before we get out of here, a couple more minutes. We have 3 games tomorrow. We'll give a real quick hit on tomorrow's games. Let me pull up the schedule so I get them in the proper order. And for tomorrow, the early game is Buffalo. No, is it? Let me get the schedule up here.
I think it's Buffalo.
It's Denver at Buffalo. Yeah, Denver Buffalo is the early game. Any quick hit thoughts on this game?
I'm leaning for Denver to cover the spread, depending on the sports book you get it at. I think it was at 8.5 the last time I checked. I don't love the way Buffalo runs the football, and what I'm really leaning on here is this Denver defense being able to potentially put this game into Josh Allen's hands. There's not one wide receiver on the Bills depth chart that is going to scare this secondary. So the key is, can you take these wide receivers and James Cook out and make Josh Allen do it himself? Because in years past, when it was all on Josh Allen, he made more mistakes.
100%. Now, in this game, I'll point out a couple of things. I did do 2 same-game parlays today. I got crushed on the Chargers one. I got it right on McConkey and Collins. I didn't get the rushing attempts right on Dobbins, and once that game got blown out, I had Houston under the points, but the defensive touchdowns, that was over. 1 defensive touchdown to close. But the second game, I did get the Steelers game. I got Warren over 3.5 receptions, likely over 2.5 receptions, Derrick Henry over 97, and the Ravens over 25.5. Here's my same-game parlay for that Broncos-Bills game. Marvin Mims over 42.5 yards. That's up to like 43.5, I think. Now, they use him on a lot of screen passes. They also will occasionally shoot downfield to him, but he is a very good matchup for Buffalo. Jaleel McLaughlin over 32.5 rushing yards. He's seeing in the neighborhood of 10-ish carries. And again, like I told you, Buffalo plays nickel as a base, and so they do give you free yards in the run game. McLaughlin should hit those. Josh Allen over 40 yards in this. It's a little bit juiced, but the reason I like it is we see a lot of man coverage. That means the corners turn their back, and whenever Allen has that, he'll take off when he knows the corners are turned. And finally, adding in there, like Anthony said, taking Denver plus the points, and that'll get you about 10. That'll get you 9 to 10 units if you play all 4 of those and they hit. Anthony, next game, Packers Eagles. Any quick hits thought on that one?
Yeah, going into this at first, I thought it was going to be a close football game, but the more I processed it and thought about how Green Bay has played down the stretch, I don't know. I'm not giving the Packers much of a chance here. I don't trust Jordan Love. I don't think LaFleur trusts Jordan Love. I feel like that he's protecting him a little bit, and we might have to see Jordan Love have to throw the football a lot, and we've seen it this year, and obviously last year, as prolific as he's been at times, when he throws the football over 30 times a game, he throws the interception. I think Philly's going to be just a little bit too much for Green Bay, and I think they easily cover the spread, and I believe the spread moved. I think it opened at 2.5, 3, and it's right around 5.5 now.
Yeah, and that should have been that way all along. That was kind of fishy when it came out. It was a little bit low. 4.5. Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, that offensive line and defensive line for the Eagles are going to be a real big difference maker for them in some of the postseason games. They have an advantage with both of them here. So I think that's a massive thing for them. And they can stop the run with that defensive line. They don't add extra bodies. And Josh Jacobs is very good, but this line has done a great job stopping the run. And the problem is no Christian Watson. And if they can't have a deep threat, that means they can walk more people down, which is problematic. Here are the 5 legs that I like in a same game parlay. Take any one of them you like, but the 5 together are about 12 units if you'll pick up 12 units if you get them. Barkley over 102.5 rushing yards. I do think they're going to run heavy and he'll wear them down in the second half. Tucker Kraft over 36.5 receiving yards with no Christian Watson. I think they use him down the seam a couple times. I think they hit on at least one of those. Eagles minus 5.5 points. I do like the points, but I think they win by a touchdown here. Packers team total under 20.5. I think both teams try to run. I don't think this is a shootout. I don't think the Eagles score a ton of points they cover, but it's not going to be where the Packers are lighting up the scoreboard. Finally, the last one, Jaden Reed over 3.5 receptions. I know he has a lot of games he doesn't get there, but with no Watson, they probably have to find a way to manufacture him the ball, so I think he goes over there. Anthony, any quick thoughts on the Commanders-Buccaneers game?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite games of the week. I'm hot and heavy on Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's beaten a lot of playoff teams this year. I know they had some weird losses, but we've seen them beat Detroit, Philly the last two times they played earlier this year. Yes, without AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. They also knocked Philly out of the playoffs last year. They beat Washington in week one. I'm just in on Baker Mayfield, and this offense can outscore anybody. And I think we both said that a lot this year. Washington, they haven't been running the football well. Brian Robinson kind of took a step back down the stretch here. And if this is a one-dimensional football game, still a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. And I think this might be when the magic ends because Tampa, Vita Vea and company, still a top 5 defense against the run.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one to watch. I can't wait to watch. My favorite bet is over 50.5. I think this game could maybe tip that at the end of the third quarter. I just don't see either team putting a big clamp down on the other one. Like you mentioned, I think the Bucs have a bit of an advantage. Bucky Irving over 87.5 yards. The run game is blocked so well. He breaks a ton of tackles, and Washington has not been great against the run. Bobby Wagner could tackle, like even for IDP, but he can't get side to side as well as he used to, and Bucky Irving can kind of take that. Austin Eckler over 18.5 receiving yards. He did well in week one, but remember what the Bucs, the blitz, and we know this, the offense already likes to dump the ball to the running back, Zach Ertz, and then take shots downfield. They can't. Terry McLaurin. I think Austin Eckler is going to be involved as a receiver here, and it will only take one catch for him to get over 18.5 yards if he does it right. Finally, I like Jaden Daniels, 50 or more rushing yards. He's been 66 or more, I think, in 3 of his last 4 games, but with that blitz coming, he's going to have to take off, so I like that. All right, everybody, so here's the deal. For the 3 Sunday games, Anthony and I'll be back on Monday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, where you're watching us. We'll break those 3 games back down for you, and then we'll also preview Monday night Vikings-Rams. We'll come back Tuesday morning and then go over that Vikings-Ram game when it's over. Anthony, any final words?
No, looking forward to tomorrow's set of games. I get today could have been a little bit boring for some, but I think with the slate of games tomorrow, we're going to have an action-packed day. Especially, I'm really looking forward to Denver, Buffalo, because I really do think Denver has a chance to not only cover, but potentially pull off the upset of the year.
There is a chance. There is a chance of that happening. Absolutely. Well, we'll look forward to that. Everybody, if you're on RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube, if you haven't subscribed, if you could, we would really appreciate it. Our goal preseason hit 3K. We're like at 2.98 or something like that. We're real close. If you can help get us over the finish line, we'd appreciate it greatly. Everybody, again, we appreciate you. Enjoy the games tomorrow. We'll see everybody Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Give Anthony a follow on the X at The Real NFL Guru. You can catch me over at Jim Coventry NFL.